Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Gini Dietrich.
That effect really only works if you're watching this.
I don't know what just happened.
I slid off screen. I went MIA.
Oh my gosh.
So
I don't even, that was, I think, the best intro we've ever had. You just left the screen. And even though I knew what the topic was, I was like, what is happening right now?
So it's my way of encouraging listeners to become viewers, because it completely loses the impact of if you only listened to that portion of it. I don't know how much impact you have from watching it either, but at least you understand what's going on.
He literally just left the screen.
I left the screen. But no, we were inspired by a Reddit post, and we haven't gone to the Reddit for quite some time.
Yeah.
So we decided to go back to Reddit and see what people were talking about. And so there is a relatively recent thread there where an agency employee says the principal of their firm has gone completely MIA, leaving them to do all of the work and feeling abandoned by the owner. That seems like a worthy topic to be discussing.
I feel like the answer is don't do that. Don't ghost your business or your
Don't
employees.
ghost your business, and here we go. We're done. Thanks for listening.
The end. Don't do that.
No, but I think it is, as owners, we sometimes overlook how our actions can be perceived by those who work for us. So it's not necessarily being completely MIA, which obviously we would discourage, but your general availability, for example, can play into your team's perceptions or your client's perceptions of what your business is like.
Absolutely.
And we certainly encourage owners to take all of the freedom that comes with being a business owner. Don't just take on all of the risk and stress. And so you need to have flexibility, and you shouldn't feel compelled to necessarily, work 9 to 5 every day exactly. You should absolutely build some flexibility into what you do, because that is honestly one of the perks of being an owner, and increasingly a perk of being an employee these days. But that's a conversation for a separate day. But we also have to be mindful of how this can be perceived, particularly by our team members, but also our clients.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, taking advantage of the flexibility that you can build in for yourself is one of those things. And I think there are lots of agency owners who do things like maybe they're giving back to the industry by teaching, or perhaps they're volunteering for PRSA or IABC or one of those, right? Or, doing something like that may be tangentially related to what we do, but not taking you away from the business. And I think that those things are good. I think that those are things that you're passionate about, that you should absolutely be doing those things, but not at the expense of the business or of your employees. Because if your employees are feeling like they're running the agency and they can't get you to make decisions or to have one-to-ones or be present, that's a problem.
Yeah, and look, this is something that I have struggled with a lot over the years, not because I just go off and sit in the mountains and, hike and relax and all that kind of stuff. It's because I've often been running more than one business. And so inevitably, one of them will typically get busier than another. And so those involved in the ones that are less busy at the moment may feel abandoned at times by me. And so it's something I've had to be particularly aware of, and making sure that I'm safeguarding against being too absent from a particular business. Sometimes you've got a business, in my case, I would have businesses that were running really well and smoothly and the team was executing, and so I didn't feel like I needed to be there. But the perception can be very different from the team side, where they feel like, well, why are you ignoring us?
Right.
And the answer might be, because you're doing such a great job, I don't really need to be there, and I'm not adding the value. But unless you're communicating that to them, they don't know that. So I think there's two things you need to be mindful of here. One is the perception, and two is your communication strategy around what you're doing. If it's industry events and things like that that are causing you to be absent, make sure that the team understands why and how that fits into the bigger picture, because that makes it easier for them to understand and less likely for them to think, oh, well, Chip's just on another junket. Here he goes, he's off to San Diego or Miami, and it's the middle of the winter. Of course he is. Why not? and those are things that are important to factor in, because it can have a meaningful impact on your team's performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was on book tour both times, I was absent from the business every week. I mean, I think 2014, I traveled 50 weeks out of the year. So it was extremely hard for me to be on book tour and speaking and business development while also running the business. And my employees, I am fairly confident, felt the brunt of that. And I don't think I probably handled it the best way either. I probably shouldn't have taken on that much travel. It helped the business grow significantly for sure, because I was also doing business development as part of it. But they definitely felt abandoned, and that they were running the agency in my absence, and that I was just off traveling the world and having a great time. And
Right.
That was their perception, right? So I think I think communicating that is right. And there are certain things that you still have to do. Like, I should have continued with one-to-ones. And because I was traveling and I was speaking and all that, I just sort of let those slide. I should have continued with all team meetings, at least bi-weekly, if not weekly. So I let those things slide, because I was traveling and I was exhausted, and in many cases I was around the world, and so time zones were crappy too. But I think that's right. I think that's the right approach, is that you still have to do certain things. If you're quote unquote abandoning your agency because you're doing something else that may or may not be helpful for the agency, or because you're taking advantage of the flexibility, which is fine too. Communicate that, but also continue sort of the process things like one-to-one,
Right.
so that people feel like you're still involved.
Yeah, I think that's key, is putting in that bit of additional effort to show some sense of normalcy to the rest of the team when you're doing those kinds of things. And I suspect that if we talked to the owner of this person's agency, they probably wouldn't describe themselves as MIA. They would probably
Right.
describe themselves as busy with a variety of different things, some of which may be beneficial to the agency directly or indirectly, or what have you. Or they may say, as I did, you've got this. I don't need to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But making sure that you have those regular touch points with your team can certainly help. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that, and we've talked about this before, is that you do have to lead by example, and that means also understanding how the example you are setting is received by your team. So, for example, if part of your perception of being MIA is that you disappear a couple of afternoons a week for your kids' sporting events, if you are not enabling your team to do that, maybe not with the same frequency, but at least periodically, that can lead to a real disconnect, because why is it okay for you and not for me? And look, there are certainly things that are okay for the owner to do and not for
Yes.
employees to do.
Yes.
But the more of those things that happen, the more frequently with which they happen, the larger the gap is between what you can do and what your team can do, the more it tends to underscore things. And so you do need to be mindful of that perception, because your team will often magnify things beyond what you even realize, and that can then lead to morale issues and other things that can crop up.
Yeah, I think that's right. I am most productive really early in the morning. My brain is really fresh and works really well creatively in the morning. So I get up and I work early in the morning, just on the stuff that takes thinking and deep thought, deep work kinds of things. Then I, do the kid thing, and I get them off to school and all that. And then I come home and I work out. So I'm at my desk really early, but then not again until 9:30 or 10. And for a while there, people didn't think that was fair. And I was like, okay, well, I'll see you at 4:30 in the morning then.
Right.
Right. But what I discovered that after I got over my smartassness, is that really giving them the opportunity to do those things throughout the day, as long as their work gets done and they're meeting deadlines and, all of the things that matter, and clients aren't requesting their time, then that's fine. So I have one person who leaves at 1:50 every day. He goes to the gym at 2. He's back by 3:15. Okay. That's totally fine, because he's doing his job. He's getting his work done. So giving them the same level of flexibility that you feel comfortable with, I think is an important thing to be able to do as well, because then they don't feel like you're getting all these advantages and they're not.
Right. And I think that it's important to factor these things even more during tough times for your agency. So, if the business is struggling and so maybe you've cut back on resources in order to save expense. And so maybe you're asking your team to do a little bit more. That's the wrong time for you to be perceived to be doing a bit less. Right. Or immediately
Yes.
after layoffs, you show up with a brand new Ferrari or something like that.
Perhaps.
A bit tone deaf. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that, if you've gone through tough times or going through tough times as an agency that you have to, appear to be a pauper. That is not what I'm telling you. However, you do need to understand what the perception will be if you all of a sudden go on a 2-week vacation to the Alps while you're taking away resources from your team and making them work, 50, 60 hours a week just to make ends meet within the business. And those are not the kinds of things that you want to do, because it does make it appear as if you have abandoned not necessarily the business, but at least the team members. And that is not how you get the best performance.
Yeah, I think the tone deafness and the perception piece of this is extraordinarily important. So we have a client who about 2 years ago had to lay off, it was about 35% of their team. And right before they did it, their CEO went on a 3-week European cruise all around Europe, was gone for 3 weeks. And then he came home and did this. And I remember saying to him, this is a bad idea. Let's either do it before you go, or let's wait a month or 6 weeks after you get back. Like right after you get back is a bad idea. He did not listen. He did it as soon as he got back. He didn't want to do it before and he couldn't wait. And so he did it as soon as he got back. And there was one person who, let's just say, rightfully so, threw that in his face when he let him go. And then they ended up suing. And I don't know, I don't know if that person will win that lawsuit, but you're still having to go through the process of being sued and, having to provide documentation and things like that. And, he could still take the vacation. He could still take the 3-week cruise, sure, right? But the timing of it is what was a problem. And so I think we have to really think about that. I think we have to think about, what kind of car we drive and, if people know what kind of home we live in. And, certainly we have those advantages because we own the company. But at the same time, there are things that people perceive, rightly or wrongly, about how you're running the business and how they're being treated when they have that kind of information about you.
Right. And it's not about, living your life differently necessarily because
Right.
of these things. It's the awareness of them, right, and trying to figure out, how to either communicate around it or make other decisions that don't make it worse, at least, and preferably even mitigate it to some degree. And this is obviously not the topic for today's show, but whenever you've got bad news for your team, don't sit on it.
Right.
I mean, you've got to get it out there because people will find out, and the sooner that people have bad news, the easier it is for them to make a course correction because of it. And the more that you sit on it, if you know that you're going to have to lay somebody off, just get it done.
Right.
Just get it done.
Right.
Anytime you've got bad news, it stresses you out. It stresses them out if they find out that you knew it a month ago, 2 months ago, and didn't tell them. So just rip that Band-Aid off and move ahead with it. But again, not really the topic for today's conversation, but I feel remiss if I don't make that point.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it goes to your point earlier, right? Which is communicate. And if you're having consistent touch bases, you and I both believe in weekly one-to-ones. If you're consistently doing that, if you're consistently communicating with them, these things will be mitigated just by the mere fact that you're talking to your team. So ensure that you're doing those things even while you're doing some of the other things that you might be passionate about or, are enjoying the flexibility with, because that's the right thing. Some people, to your point, want to be at their kids' events, and school is not made for working parents. So sometimes that means 2:45 to 5 is they're gone, right? You also don't see them working late into the night or early in the morning because you're not at your desk at that time. So you have to understand there are things that as owners we're going to do to quote unquote make up the time where maybe our employees don't see that. So communicate. Just talk to them. Tell them what's going on.
Yep. Yeah, and it's just as important as to talk with them, you've got to listen to them, right? Because again, to my point that this owner probably would not describe themselves as MIA, you need to be tuned into your team so that you can pick up on perhaps that's the perception. So if you're finding that they're saying, hey, I'm not getting the answers I need, or I'm not getting the information I need, or when do you think you might actually be around for this? Or kind of listen to some of those things, and particularly the tone of some of those things, and key into them so that you can spot some of these issues before they really become major problems for you to deal with. Because if you can sense from these conversations and through the listening that there are things that need to be addressed, you can take care of it a lot easier now than you can 6 months down the road when it reaches a boiling point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the exact correct thing to do. And, I think if your employees are feeling like they've been ghosted or abandoned, that is definitely a you issue, and that needs to be solved pretty fast.
Yeah, and you've got to encourage the team to open up to you as much as possible. I mean, you do sign the paycheck, so you've got to be realistic about how much candid feedback and such you will get. But one of the things that I have always encouraged my team members to do is to feel free to beat me about the head and shoulders if I'm not getting them what they need in a timely enough fashion. And do I believe that they will consistently do that? No. The vast majority of the employees I've had haven't done that consistently, but they know it's an option to them, so they do tap into that as and when needed. I've had a handful of employees who are actually really good about it. And by really good, I mean really kind of annoying about it, because like the minute I was a minute late in getting them the feedback that I had promised, I get the knock on my office door. Hey, I need this. But frankly, that was helpful, right? At least it was direct. It got them what they needed, and so you need to be listening for those cues so that you can spot them and hopefully try to improve your own behavior in that going forward. Whether that's by setting different expectations of the timeliness with which you can get to it because you're traveling, because you've got these other commitments or whatever, or simply by being a little bit quicker to turn those things around.
Yes. That is one of the most, I think that's one of the most challenging things, is that piece of it, is being the bottleneck on certain kinds of things. So figuring out ways to communicate that effectively. And sometimes you promise something, like I could promise something to you by Wednesday, but I don't know based on what my schedule is right at this moment, right?
Right.
But there's going to be client things that come up. There are going to be HR issues that come up that I am not at all expecting. And all of a sudden my whole week is thrown into chaos where there's no physically possible way I can now get it to you by Wednesday because of all this other stuff. And some of that I can't communicate to the employee, right?
Right.
So I just have to say, like, some things came up. I'm really sorry. Can I get an extra 48 hours or whatever it happens to be, right? So I think those are the kinds of conversations we have to be really understanding about, because the perception is that you're just ignoring them and you're sitting at your desk drinking wine and painting your toenails.
Yeah, I stopped painting my toenails a few years ago. But anyway, but I think that along those lines, I think it's important for you, to be clear about what you actually need to be a bottleneck on. And so sometimes this can be a useful exercise to say, do I really need to review and approve this? Do I really need to edit this? If not, maybe that's something that you can pass off. And so maybe the way that you solve some of those things is by passing it along and saying, you've got the authority to handle this now. I completely trust you on this. I don't need to see this. You take it, you run with it. And I've often used those situations where I'm becoming an increasing bottleneck to try to figure out, how do we change the process so that I'm not, either by involving me at a different stage or just taking me out of it altogether. Because, and that's particularly true when I would find things where I was consistently just saying, yep, this is good. Yep, this is good. And I didn't feel the need any longer to keep going through that. And so you need to find those things, but also communicate why you are taking yourself out of that process. Because if you just take yourself out of it, that's where you look like you're going MIA.
Right.
If you say, look, I completely trust your judgment. I don't need to see this. And you should usually include the caveat, unless you want me to look at something, right? because sometimes someone just feels more confident about maybe there's something they're putting out and they want your set of eyes on it. They want that perspective.
Sure.
Don't discourage them from doing that, but let them know that on a routine basis that's not necessary.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. So I think there are a few good takeaways from this, that this is not necessarily the topic of the day, but breaking up that bottleneck, ensuring that your team you're consistently running the business from like a process perspective. I think that's really smart. Communicating effectively is really smart. There was one other that you said the podcast wasn't about that I thought was really good. Shoot.
Well, the beauty is people have the recording. They can just hit
go
rewind.
backwards.
They can look at the transcript that Jen puts up on the website. I do that sometimes as well, just to see what I said.
Right.
Figure out, so I'm consistent-ish in my advice that I give. So, but in any case, hopefully you have some things that you can use as tools so that you're not perceived as MIA, or if you have to be MIA, how to communicate more effectively and work with your team on it. And lots of bonus tips in here as well, because we just can't help ourselves, and we'll follow whatever path we might find over the course of the conversation. At least after I come back on camera and on mic, so that I can participate. So with that, I'm going to go. I guess I'm not MIA, because that we're wrapping up, and so it will make sense when I leave at the end of this. But I'm Chip Griffin.
I'm Ginny Dietrich.
And it depends.